Texas, the second largest state in America. No state income tax, cheap land, a booming economy that attracted millions of people from California, Florida, and everywhere in between over the last decade. The Texas promise was simple: more for less, more space, more freedom, more opportunity, more for your money. But there is a Texas that most new arrivals never see. A Texas where third-world living conditions are not a metaphor or a political talking point. Where boil water notices are a routine part of daily life. Where crumbling infrastructure has been crumbling for decades without repair. Where poverty rates rival the poorest communities in the developing world, not in some foreign country, but inside the wealthiest economy on Earth. Today we are counting down 10 Texas towns where the conditions are not what any Texas tourism video will ever show you. Real places, real numbers from 2025 and 2026, real people dealing with conditions that have no business existing in a state this wealthy. And number one is the one nobody warned you about, not because it is remote, but because of exactly where it sits on the map. If you are thinking about moving to Texas, already live here, or you have family anywhere near these places, this video may be the most useful thing you watch this year. Drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from right now. If you are in Texas, I especially want to hear from you. Hit subscribe, because number one is going to change how you think about this state entirely. Number 10. Hearn, Texas, Robertson County. This is a town that used to matter. Hearn was a significant railroad hub in the early 20th century, the kind of crossing point that turned small Texas towns into functioning communities with real economic mass. The railroad moved on, the jobs moved on, and in 2025, nearly 30% of Hearn's residents live below the federal poverty line, against a median household income of $30,938. Robertson County has a residential vacancy rate of approximately 19%. The single county hospital serves a geography that spans hundreds of square miles. The nearest Level 1 trauma center is over an hour away. State economists have classified Robertson County as one of Texas's persistently low-income counties, meaning this is not a temporary downturn. Poverty here has been the structural baseline for multiple generations. The Texas economic expansion that reshaped Austin and the Dallas suburbs did not slow down when it reached Robertson County. It simply did not arrive. According to the Texas Demographic Center's 2025 poverty visualization, Robertson County has exceeded the Texas state poverty average every year for more than 15 consecutive years. When nearly 1 in 3 residents lives below the federal poverty line and adequate healthcare infrastructure is an hour away, the institutional term for what exists here is structural poverty. It is not breaking news. It is the documented, persistent baseline. And in Texas, it is far more common than the state's economic narrative acknowledges. Number 9. Jasper, Texas, Jasper County. You are looking at one of the most densely forested counties in Texas, the Sabine National Forest, the Sam Rayburn Reservoir, natural resources that should anchor a prosperous regional economy. And yet, a poverty rate of 28.66%, nearly double the Texas state average. East Texas's timber economy peaked decades ago. The sawmills closed, the major employers moved. What replaced them was limited. Healthcare is critically understaffed in Jasper County. There is no Level 1 or Level 2 trauma center within the county lines. According to EMS supervisors who have cited this publicly on multiple occasions, a serious accident on a Jasper County road can result in a 2-hour medical transport. That is a documented emergency response deficit, not a figure of speech. The Sabine National Forest generates federal timber revenue. Almost none of it reaches the county's infrastructure budget. Jasper County's per capita income places it in the bottom 5th of Texas counties. School districts here operate on budgets that require perpetually deferring technology upgrades, facility maintenance, and extracurricular programming. In a state where the Permian Basin generates tens of billions in annual oil revenue, Jasper County operates as though Texas's wealth stops at its county line. The timber is still there. The economic benefit of that timber, historically extracted and moved out of state, is not. Number 8. Robstown, Texas, Nueces County, 12 miles west of Corpus Christi. On the map, it looks like a city in the orbit of a larger metro, positioned to benefit from economic spillover from the coastal bend. In reality, Robstown operates in a different world entirely. 31% of its residents live below the poverty line, 1 in 3. The crime rate in Robstown stands at 31 per 1,000 residents, placing it among the highest crime communities in the entire state of Texas. Over 92% of Texas communities have lower crime rates. Employment in Robstown declined 1.62% year over year in 2024. Population has been falling for more than 2 decades. What those statistics represent on the ground: businesses that closed and did not reopen, residents who could leave and chose to, and a municipal tax base that cannot fund the services the remaining population needs at a functional level. Nueces County contains Corpus Christi, a city that has attracted significant industrial and port investment, and Robstown, 12 miles away, that has seen almost none of it. The proximity does not help. Economic opportunity in this region clusters around port infrastructure and refinery operations, not in the working-class communities that surround them. Being adjacent to prosperity and not participating in it is a different and arguably more demoralizing condition than geographic isolation. That gap is visible to anyone who drives the 12 miles between them. Number 7. Crystal City, Texas, Zavala County. If you know Crystal City, you know it as the city that inspired Popeye the Sailor Man, a place so proud of its spinach heritage that it erected a statue of the cartoon character downtown. What Crystal City does not advertise: it ranks as the 4th poorest city in Texas, with a poverty rate well above 30% and a median income that places it in the bottom tier of every state ranking. In February 2016, CNN reported that black, sludge-like water began flowing from Crystal City faucets. Residents described it as comparable to oil, viscous, dark, and accompanied by the smell of decay. The cause was years of deferred maintenance on iron distribution pipes that had corroded from the inside. The city had documented knowledge of the deterioration. The budget to address it did not exist. In October 2024, the Texas Water Development Board approved $9.2 million in emergency financing for Crystal City to replace wastewater infrastructure, much of it constructed of clay pipe and asbestos cement. Work is currently underway. Crystal City is not uniquely unlucky. It is a representative example of what happens when a small Texas city has a tax base too narrow to maintain basic infrastructure for long enough that deferred maintenance becomes a structural crisis. The Texas Water Development Board's 2024 $9.2 million financing package is not economic development. It is emergency repair for pipes that should have been replaced decades earlier. The documentation of the problem and the resources to fix it arrived 30 years apart. Number 6. Dilly, Texas, Frio County. Located on I-35, approximately 90 miles south of San Antonio, a city of roughly 4,000 residents. The economic base is agriculture, peanuts, cattle, some oil patch activity during boom years when rigs were active in the Eagle Ford Shale. Outside of those 2 or 3 sectors, there is almost nothing, and the wages from those industries barely touch the families who live there. According to 24/7 Wall Street's Texas Poverty Analysis, Dilly has limited job opportunities outside of agriculture, an underfunded school system, and elevated rates of poverty and crime compared to state averages. The Dilly School District operates under state accountability designations that reflect persistent underperformance driven by budget constraint. Frio County has no hospital within its boundaries. The nearest emergency care facility is in a neighboring county. That is a healthcare access condition that state health policy researchers classify as a critical rural health gap. The fracking boom in the Eagle Ford Shale brought temporary jobs to the area in the early 2010s. When oil prices dropped, the rigs moved, and the workers followed them to the next active play. The residents who remained were the people who had always been there, with a municipal infrastructure that was never upgraded during the boom years because extraction revenue and community investment are not the same thing in Texas. The pattern across this list is consistent. Resources extracted, communities left without the proceeds. Before number 5. The number 1 town on this list is not a border community. It is not in West Texas. It is not in a remote corner of the state that you have never heard of. Number 1 is 45 miles from one of the wealthiest cities in the United States. Keep that in mind as we get there. First, number 5. Number 5. Presidio, Texas, Presidio County. The most geographically isolated incorporated city in Texas, surrounded by the Chihuahuan Desert on one side and the Rio Grande on the other. The nearest city of any size is Midland, 2 hours and 15 minutes to the northeast. Alpine, the Presidio County seat, is 90 miles away. The poverty rate in the city of Presidio is 50.68%. The median household income is $16,762. More than half, 54.3%, of all Presidio families live in poverty. These are current figures from the U.S. Census Bureau's Quick Facts for Presidio County. Summers in Presidio exceed 110 degrees Fahrenheit with regularity. When systems fail here, water, power, medical, the nearest alternative is more than 2 hours away. That distance is not an inconvenience. It is a structural condition that shapes every decision residents make. Presidio Municipal Hospital has faced documented financial instability and staffing shortages for over a decade. Dialysis patients in Presidio must travel to Midland or Odessa for treatment, over 200 miles round trip, multiple times per week. In a state with an annual GDP above $2 trillion, there are communities where a routine medical appointment requires a 400-mile round trip. Presidio is not an anomaly in this regard. It is a data point that represents a pattern. Texas's economic growth is distributed unevenly, and in many places, not at all. Number 4, Roma, Texas, Starr County. Population approximately 12,000. Starr County's median household income is $38,824, placing it among the lowest income counties in Texas. And that figure, low as it is, does not capture what exists outside the city limits. This is where the Texas Colonias begin in earnest. According to a Texas Tribune investigation published in 2023, approximately 38,000 Texans remain in the most extreme colonia conditions, without clean running water, without functioning sewer systems, and without the legal land titles needed to even apply for utility connections. The poverty rate in Starr County Colonias sits at approximately 42%. The Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs has documented these conditions for decades. The documentation has consistently outpaced the remediation. 500,000 people statewide live in colonias. Most of them are United States citizens. These are not squatters or illegal settlements. They are communities where people bought land, often from developers who implied that infrastructure was coming, and have been waiting decades for those promises to materialize. The state has active programs to address colonia conditions. The pace of those programs, measured against the scale of the problem and the number of people still without running water in 2026, is not keeping up. Roma and the surrounding Starr County communities represent the most visible and documented version of that gap. Number 3. Eagle Pass, Texas, Maverick County. Eagle Pass has received extensive national media coverage in recent years. Almost none of that coverage concerned the city's poverty rate, its healthcare deficit, or its infrastructure condition. Maverick County's poverty rate is approximately 29%. The county's median household income falls significantly below the Texas state median. The nearest Level 1 trauma center is in San Antonio, 143 miles to the northeast. For a cardiac event, a stroke, a serious vehicle accident, the gap between Eagle Pass and adequate emergency care is not an inconvenience. It is a variable that determines outcomes. The Eagle Pass School District operates with among the lowest per-pupil spending in the region. The economic base, retail, government employment, agriculture, limited manufacturing, provides a revenue structure that cannot sustain infrastructure investment. In 2023 and 2024, Eagle Pass generated significant national and international media attention for reasons that had nothing to do with its poverty rate, its healthcare access deficit, or its crumbling infrastructure. Those headlines have mostly moved on. The structural conditions have not. Maverick County has been listed among Texas's economically distressed counties, eligible for Special State Economic Development Assistance for over 20 consecutive years. In a state policy document, that is a designation. In the community, it describes the baseline from which residents build their daily lives, generation after generation. Number 2. Port Arthur, Texas, Jefferson County. Port Arthur processes more petroleum and petrochemical products than almost any city in the United States. The refineries and chemical plants along this stretch of the Gulf Coast represent hundreds of billions of dollars in industrial investment, and the residential community directly adjacent to those refineries is one of the most environmentally burdened and economically deprived places in the country. Port Arthur's poverty rate is approximately 29%. The unemployment rate runs more than twice the state and national averages. According to the Environmental Integrity Project, the cancer mortality rate for African Americans in Jefferson County is consistently approximately 40% higher than the Texas state average. 1 in 5 West Port Arthur households has a family member with a chronic respiratory illness. The cumulative health impact of living adjacent to the most concentrated industrial pollution corridor on the Gulf Coast is not theoretical. It shows up in hospital records, death certificates, and the life expectancy statistics of the neighborhoods closest to the stacks. John Beard, Jr., founder and executive director of the Port Arthur Community Action Network, published a statement through Earth Justice in 2024. He said, Communities like ours in Port Arthur have long been viewed as sacrifice zones by the oil and gas industry, as they maximize their profits while we pay the price with our health and safety. The term sacrifice zone is not hyperbole. It is the economic description of a community where the cost of industrial production is externalized onto nearby residents who do not share in the revenue. Port Arthur generates billions. The people breathing the output of that generation have a median household income below $50,000. From 2012 to 2016, industrial facilities in the Port Arthur area generated 230 documented illegal air pollution events, upset incidents releasing toxic chemicals including benzene into the surrounding air without authorization. Fines were issued. Operations continued. The EPA rates Port Arthur as among the highest priority environmental justice communities in the country. That designation has existed for years. It has not changed the fundamental economic arrangement. The industrial infrastructure generates profit that leaves the county. The health costs remain behind. And number one, the one nobody warned you about. Not a border community, not a remote West Texas oil town, not a depopulated rural county that most Texans have never visited. Number one on this list is 45 miles northwest of downtown Houston, in the direct shadow of the fourth largest city in the United States. Prairie View, Texas, Waller County, population 8,184, home to Prairie View A&M University, the second oldest public university in Texas, established in 1876 as an institution for black students following emancipation. According to RoadSnack's 2025 ranking of the poorest cities in Texas, Prairie View is the single poorest city in the entire state. The median household income is $19,106, the lowest median income of any city in Texas. The poverty rate is 37.3%. Prairie View is not obscure. It sits on US 290, a major Texas state highway corridor. It is 45 minutes from the Houston Galleria. It is 15 minutes from Katy, one of the fastest-growing suburbs in Texas. Its university has produced graduates serving at every level of government, every branch of the military, in medicine, law, engineering, and education across the country for 150 years. And in 2025, the city that surrounds that institution has a median household income of $19,000, lower than the median household income reported in countries the United States classifies as lower middle-income nations. The structural reason Prairie View registers these numbers involves the same pattern that appears across every city on this list. A tax base too narrow to generate adequate municipal revenue means services cannot be sustained, which means economic investment does not arrive, which reinforces the tax base problem indefinitely. Prairie View A&M generates significant economic activity in Waller County. The city of Prairie View has not captured that activity in its municipal revenue in any sustained way. That is not a Prairie View failure. It is a Texas policy failure. The failure to ensure that the wealth generated in a place reaches the people who live in that place. Prairie View, 45 miles from Houston, is what that failure looks like in 2026. Those are 10 Texas towns where third-world living conditions are not a metaphor. From Hearn and Robertson County to Port Arthur on the Gulf Coast to Prairie View in the shadow of Houston. The data here comes from the U.S. Census Bureau, the Texas Tribune, the Environmental Integrity Project, the Texas Water Development Board, and the residents who live in these places every day. Texas is real wealth and real poverty, sometimes in the same county, and on this list, 45 miles apart. If this video changed how you think about Texas, subscribe and leave a comment below. Tell me which city shocked you most. And if you live near any of these places, tell me what the day-to-day reality is actually like. I read every comment.